Good morning. Welcome to Truth for Today. This is Dai-Ching Yuan, your host and teacher, pastor of Abilene Bible Church. Today we're continuing our study of the revelation of Jesus Christ. This is lesson number 7, Sardis, a breathless church for life. The text is chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. We are in the big project of studying eschatology. By studying 3 key books on this subject. The book of Daniel gave us the story about the visible kingdom, which is Israel. It was judged for sin. It was promised to restore. The Messiah shall come after 69 weeks of Daniel, and he will be cut off. The key verse in the whole book is Daniel 9:24 through 27, where it promised 70 weeks of Daniel, or rather 490-year program for the restoration of Israel. And the second key book is the Gospel of Matthew, especially the 5 pillars or 5 long discourses of Jesus. And it tells us the story about the spiritual kingdom, or the kingdom of heaven, or the universal church. It was introduced by Christ in the first pillar, and then it's introduced to the Jews but rejected by them in a second pillar. In the third pillar, it promised the realization of the kingdom of heaven in the church. So it predicted the 7 periods of the church. And then it emphasized the key of kingdom life is the Beatitudes. And finally, it gave us the prediction about the transitional period between the spiritual kingdom to the full kingdom. That is the tribulation, which is the 70th week of Daniel. So the key in Matthew is Matthew 24 to 25, which is Olivet Discourse, talking about the transition, therefore about eschatology. And the book of Revelation predicts what must happen before and after the coming of the full kingdom. So chapter 1 gave us Jesus Christ in glory. Chapter 2 and 3 gave the church in history. And that's where we are now. The church in history has 7 letters to 7 churches. It represents 7 kinds of church and the 7 stages of churches. The structure of the book of Revelation, it has a preface as a book and a testimony at the end. And it, as an epistle, it has salutations and it has benedictions at the end. And as prophecy, it has the 7 churches, and it has the prophecy after the church period of the rapture, the tribulation, the second coming, the millennium, and the eternity. And the structure is divided by the book itself in verse 119. What you saw is Christ in glory. Things that are is the church period. Things to come are the eschatological events or periods from the rapture to eternity. And the 7 churches are named after 7 local churches in the first century. They are Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. They, interestingly, formed a path that goes up first and flat, then down and flat and down. This seems to be parallel to the power of the church in the world. It went from nothing to something greater with the Christian Roman Empire, then to the Catholic Church, then to the Reformed Church, then to Evangelical Church, then to postmodern church. And the 7 first-century churches in Asia is a chain of metropolitan house churches. It's networked in Asia Minor, set up by Apostle Paul and Apostle John. Ephesus leads the other 6 churches. Each church leads the churches of nearby clusters of towns, such as Colossae was led by Laodicea. The encyclical epistle of Ephesians was passed from Ephesus to the six, then to others. For Colossae, it became the letter from Laodicea. And the 7 types of churches in history are named by the 7 local churches in Asia. Ephesus was a loveless church for truth. It loves truth, but it lacks love. Okay, it is a type of the fundamentalist churches of today. Smyrna is a moneyless church for faith. It's a church rich in faith but lacked money. It represents the persecuted house churches in the whole world, even today. Pergamum is a valueless church for power. It loves power because it has the throne, but its value starts to depart from the biblical value because those who love power and those who love money came to the top. And this represents the state churches that are in various countries. Today, the Eastern Orthodox Church are all state churches. Thyatira is a moralist church for work. It loves to do good works, but its moral is totally decayed. So those who love power came in the church of Ephesus. Those who love money came in Pergamum, and those who love power, money, and the flesh came in the Thyatira. And that represents the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, the Roman Catholic Church is the longest in church history. It represents 1,000 years, and it's most important in church history because it was the most powerful, but it's also most disappointing when it fell. Sardis was a breathless church for life. It is a church that is escaped from the Catholics for a spiritual life, but it's still breathless. In other words, it doesn't have breath from the Holy Spirit. It represents the Reformed denominations, or the churches that came out of the Reformation that today became the major denominations. And they have mostly became liberal and lifeless without the Holy Spirit. And then the next will be Philadelphia and Laodicea. We'll talk about them later. Today, we're talking about actually Sardis. And the 7 historical periods are represented by the 7 parables Jesus gave in the kingdom parables and the 7 letters to 7 churches. The parable of sower, talking about the Son of God sows the gospel, and it's represented by the apostolic church from 33 to 100. 33 is when the church was born at Pentecost. 100 is when the Bible was finished and then Apostle John died. And the parable of tare and the letter to Smyrna represent the patristic church, the church fathers. There are a mixture of wheat and tare, and then the church was house church, lack of money but full of faith. It's from 100 to either 312, the conversion of Constantine, or 325, the Council of Nicaea. The parable of the mustard seed represents an unusual growth, and then the Pergamum represents those who have bigamy or 2 lords. In other words, the imperial church, when the church has 2 lords, Christ and the emperor. And that represents the state church from 312 or 325 to 590. 590 is the time when Gregory I became the first pope, and thus began the Roman Catholic Church. The parable of leaven means turning into sin, and the Thyatira, which means continuous sacrifice, and that represents the Roman Catholic Church from 590 to 1517. 1517 is the time when Martin Luther nailed 95 Theses on the Wittenberg Church, and thus marking the beginning of the Reformation. Okay. Today we're dealing with the 5th parable, which is the hidden treasure. And the greatest truths, one of the greatest truths in the Bible that was kind of hidden throughout church history until then was salvation by faith alone. The church dealt with two important issues before then through the universal councils from Nicaea, the issue of Trinity and the issue of Christology. Okay, that God is one but three persons, and Christ is both God and man. So those were dealt with, but on salvation issues, there have been some dealing with semi-Pelagianism, etc. But the bottom line was set at the time of the Reformation, that salvation is by faith alone. And then that was a hidden treasure, lost or hidden, but rediscovered at the time of Reformation. Sardis means escape, so it's to escape from the Roman Catholic Church. And that is the church from the Reformation. We call them Reformed church, but Reformed really is one of the denominations. But it represents those who came from the Reformation. Okay, and its period is 1517 to 1727. 1517 is Martin Luther nailing the 95 Theses. 1727 is the so-called Second Pentecost of the Moravian Brethren. And that's the beginning of the evangelical church, the change from the external to the internal. So let's go and study more on this background. Historical and prophetic. For each church period, there were all 7 kinds of churches, but one of them was the dominant type. So in the apostolic church, the church of Ephesus was the dominant type. In the patristic church, the church of Smyrna was the dominant type. In the imperial church, from 312 to 590, the Pergamum church was the dominant type. In the Catholic church period, from 590 to 1517, the Thyatira church was the dominant type. Okay, so the corruption came gradually from the apostolic time, those who love power. Okay, in the those who love power came to the church. Nicodemus. They came to the church. And from the imperial church, those who love Balaam, those who love money, okay, came to the power. And the Catholic church, the Jezebel, the false prophetess. That's when the love of flesh came to the church. And then the whole body was corrupted. Okay, then a regeneration of the spirit is necessary. Okay, and reform the church, or the Reformation period from 1517 to 1727 was a time when the church of Sardis was the dominant type. That's what we're studying today. And there are options on understanding the 7 letters to 7 churches. Some believe they are just first century historical church. Some believe they are all-time historical church. Some believe in historical prophetic, okay, 7 periods in 7 church history. And then some believe they are futuristic prophetic church, only for the tribulation. I believe in the third type, third option, and that's because I think historical evidence has made it pretty clear that there are indeed 7 stages of church history and 7 types of churches all the time. Okay, the elements of the 7 letters, they all have a church name, which is symbolic in meaning, and that Christ has a self-claim that he owns something that the church needs. And then he will give his knowledge and his praise for the positive aspects of the church. Then he will give his criticism and warning for the negative aspects of the church. And he will give a prophecy for future events in order to refine the church. And he will give a proclamation universally. He who has an ear, let him hear. And then he'll give a promise, which is a reward for the overcomers. Each overcomer is the one who doesn't commit the typical sin of the age of his church. Now, for this church, Sardis, okay, to the angel of the church in Sardis, write. Okay, Sardis, which in Greek is Sardis, was a double city. It has an old city, which later as the Acropolis, on a hill 1,500 feet above the new city. It was easily defensible, and it was the ancient capital of the kingdom of Lydia, which was pretty ancient, from about 1200 BC to 549 BC. And some Bible scholars, like Pambler or Pentecost, saw the names meaning those who escaped. Thus, the church was prophetical related to the Reformation, thus escaping from the Roman Catholicism. Okay. Here is a map of the kingdom of Lydia, which is today's Turkey, the western part of it. It will include Troy, okay, the ancient city that had the Trojan War with the Greeks. Okay, and then the cities of Miletus was on the seashore. Ephesus, Sardis, Smyrna, Sardis, they're all in this area. And Sardis, the city, the upper city, was built on a mountain 1,500 feet above the valley. There was only one way up. See, that was a flat top. That was probably the ancient city. There was only one way up, and it was easily defended. Okay, and here is a chronology of the kingdom of Lydia, and these are derived from the writing of one who is called the father of history, Herodotus. Okay, and his book, of course, is called History, which really means investigation. Okay, he did some investigation. He was a globetrotter, and that he traveled to many places, and he learned from locals about their history, and he would write them down. And he gave us a Egyptian history, which is different from today's secular Egyptology. It will be an interesting topic by itself. But he also gave us the history of the several kingdoms, including Lydia. Okay, and he gave the name of these kings and their days, years of rulership. And the end, since we know when it came, when King Cyrus of Persia, Medo-Persia, defeated Croesus, who was his great uncle. Okay, and then we know the end, so we add it up, we can have its beginning. Interestingly, the beginning of the kingdom of Lydia was from 722 BC, the year when Israel, the northern kingdom of the Hebrew people, fell to Assyria. In that year, Gugus became the king, founded the kingdom of Lydia, and he ruled for 38 years. And after him, it was Sardis, 49 years, Sardis, 12 years. And in the latter part of his time, there was a war with Miletus, and it lasted for 11 years, basically 6 years before the end of Sardis and 6 years after, during the reign of Alyatus, okay, who ruled for 62 years. And during that time, there was a war with Media. Okay, Media was the former empire of Persia, and it lasted for 6 years. And that war only ended when there was a solar eclipse that frightened both sides of the war, and they thought their war have angered heaven, and the gods would punish both sides. So because of that, they stopped the war, and they asked someone who was a great king at that time to be the peacemaker, and that man turns out to be Nebuchadnezzar of the Bible. Yes, the one who conquered Judah and took Daniel, and he was the peacemaker. And the solar eclipse was predicted by a man from Miletus named Thales. Okay, that was the first precisely predicted solar eclipse in the world history. And Thales thus became very famous. And this is called Thales solar eclipse. He predicted on May 28th, 585 BC, and it happened. And we can see it from this map. Let me see. Here is a, if you go to NASA, go to its eclipse map, and you go to the 5,000-year canon of solar eclipse, and you click the year of negative 584, which is 585 BC. They differ by 1 year. Okay, negative 584. Then you can find 2 eclipses in that year, and one of them is this. And here is the path where the total eclipse is seen. You can see it covers Europe, Italy, and Asia Minor. So you can see the war was happening in Lydia, which is Asia Minor here. Okay, so that's why the media is from here. Is from Iran. It's in northern Iran was Media. So Media invaded, and the war was in the path of this solar eclipse, and it can all the way be seen into Syria and Iraq. So that's why Nebuchadnezzar could have seen it. And after this, they made peace. Okay, so the 3 kingdoms exchanged the princesses to be wedded to each other, and thus they became allied to each other. Okay, so we have Arianus from, I think Arianus is from Lydia, will be marrying Arianus from Media, I think, married Aliadus, the king here, and Astyages was his son. Arianus, the daughter of Aliadus. Okay, so the Lydia princess would marry Astyages, who's the son of Cyaxares the first, who was the king of Media. Okay, so the 2 nations became allies. Okay, and I think in that deal, Nebuchadnezzar also got a wife from Media, and because she loved the mountain, and Babylon was flat, so Nebuchadnezzar built the Hanging Garden for her. Okay, and that's one of the 7 wonders of the world. And now, I think 6 of them are gone. Only the Giza period still exists, but all of the other are gone. But Hanging Garden was built because of this wife of Nebuchadnezzar from Media during this peacemaking due to this solar eclipse. Okay, and the son of Aliadus was Croesus, and he ruled for 14 years. Okay, and the daughter of Astyages and Arianus was the mother of Cyrus. So that's why Arianus was Croesus' sister, and then she is the grandmother of Cyrus. So Croesus was Cyrus' great uncle. Okay, but Cyrus, who was born from a Median princess, but married to a Persian prince. Persia at that time was a small country under Media, and that's another story by itself, because there were prophecies to Astyages about his country will be overrun by his daughter's descendant. So he asked Cyrus to be thrown away to the wolves. But the steward who threw him away had a stillborn son, so he kept the boy. The boy grew up and then was later recognized and restored. And so he became a Median prince, and he inherited the Median Empire rather than conquering it. Okay, different from secular history. So that's the history part of Lydia. Okay, and Cyrus later conquered Lydia when he became the as a Persian, he inherited the Median throne. Thus, the Median Empire became the Medo-Persian Empire. At first, it divided the Assyrian Empire together with the Babylonian Empire by the Tigris River. But later, the Medo-Persians conquered Babylon, okay, under Cyrus. And thus, it became the great Persian Empire, okay, and later also conquered Egypt, etc. So that was history. Lydia was one of the three great kingdoms that Cyrus conquered, or rather the Medo-Persian Empire conquered. Okay, so Lydia was one, and Babylon was one, and Egypt was one. Cyrus only conquered the first two, and then his son conquered Egypt. Okay, so those were the three ribs in the mouth of the bear, that symbolizing Persia, Medo-Persia. Okay, so that was the history of the Median Empire, and then we will talk about what Sardis means in the church later. God bless His word.